if we go into a recession, it could be a lot more severe than maybe what we saw even during the GFC, because the Fed is backed up into a corner where all their tools will only exacerbate the problem. There are decades that go by where nothing happens, and there's weeks that go by when decades happen. And
Great, that's
I think
profound,
that's really what we're living through right now in 2022 as far as the economy. Unprecedented. I mean, the Fed just raised 75 basis points.
Yeah.
I don't think they've done that for probably 30 or 40 years. We're going into what is most likely a recession. And what is unique about this is that it's an inflationary recession. In the past, we'd have a recession where inflation was actually going down, so they could come in and, quote unquote, print money and try to prop up the economy. But now they're in a very difficult position because anything they do may make the problem even worse. And now we've got a supply problem. We don't have a financial problem. We don't have a liquidity problem. We don't have enough oil. We don't have enough food. We don't have enough shelter. We don't have enough stuff. And to Robert's point, the Fed can print money, but they can't print stuff. So this crisis that we're going into potentially could be a lot different. And it could be, people are saying, even if we have a recession, it's probably going to be shallow. It's not going to be that long. I don't know. We've got to remember that it's only, there are no certainties, there are only probabilities. And I think if you look at the probabilities, that they're actually higher, that if we go into a recession, it could be a lot more severe than maybe what we saw even during the GFC, because the Fed is backed up into a corner where all their tools will only exacerbate the problem. So some things that I would use to back that statement up is if you look at the yield curve. So there's different maturities on the treasury market. You've got a 4-week treasury, then it goes all the way out to a 30-year treasury.
Okay.
So at each point in that timeline, that treasury has a different interest rate.
Okay.
Right? So you would expect that the longer to maturity, meaning the longer someone is borrowing the money, the higher the interest rate would be because there's more risk.
Yeah.
What we've seen recently is an inversion of the yield curve to where the 2-year treasury, the interest rate is higher than the interest rate on the 10-year. That is very abnormal. And if you go back to 1950, pretty much 100% of the time when we get this inversion of the yield curve, within 18 to 24 months, we get a recession.
Wow.
Right? So, but the problem with the Fed that they have is they've got high CPI. So the politicians know that they can't get reelected if the consumer...
And CPI stands for?
The Consumer Price Index.
Oh, yes.
If the headline CPI is at 8.6, people are really angry about food prices and gas prices. They know their probability of being reelected is very low. So they meet with Jerome Powell, say, hey, I have to do something. So Jerome Powell believes in something, or the PhDs at the Fed believe in something called the Phillips curve. And this is basically, there's an inverse and this, their words, not mine, inverse relationship between the rate of unemployment and inflation. So as unemployment goes lower, that puts upward pressure on inflation.
Okay.
So if they want to decrease inflation, well, they've got to increase the unemployment rate. Usually they would do this by taking interest rates and normalizing them. The problem there is that normalizing Fed funds, which is their overnight rate, is like 4 or 5%. They can't do that because that would completely implode the economy because the debts are so high. So I just used a chart in one of my recent whiteboard videos that shows the net worth in aggregate total of Americans relative to GDP. So as a percentage.
Okay.
If you go back to 1980, when Paul Volcker raised rates to squash inflation, he raised them up to 18%.
Yeah.
When he did that, the net worth of Americans in aggregate total, about 300% of GDP. Okay. Now it's over 600%. Of GDP.
Damn.
So the Fed looks at this and says, aha, what we can do to bring down the CPI, or in other words, bring up the unemployment rate, instead of normalizing rates, we can bring asset prices down.
Okay.
So they're doing that through expectations policy. They're doing that slightly by raising rates, but let's remember that rates are still only 150 basis points. And look at how much damage it's already doing to the economy.
Yeah.
Kenny's talking about all these deals that are collapsing.
People walking away from $1 million.
And the cap rates going up, the price is going down, and this is with interest rates just going from 75 basis points up to 150. What happens if they normalize and go to 5%? And that's when the whole house of cards come down. So I think they're trying to bring down inflation through asset prices so they don't implode the economy. And they're doing this through quantitative tightening, which is the opposite of quantitative easing. They're trying to reduce the size of their balance sheet, and they're trying to talk tough, right? We're going to get tough on inflation. And then you always hear them mention Paul Volcker. And they're doing that so the market believes that they're going to continue to raise interest rates, even though they can't, to a certain level, to again bring down those asset prices, increase unemployment, to bring down the CPI. This is their game, and this is why, or one of the main reasons, you see cryptocurrency going from a $3 trillion market cap to an $800 billion market cap within the span of 2 months or something like that. And you could see the same thing with the stock market, and gradually over time you could see the same thing with residential. Now it starts with commercial, like Kenny was saying, but will that trickle down to residential? I don't know. I think you've got to compartmentalize things, but that's what I think your audience needs to be cognizant of over the next 6 months to a year. And
I think this thing saving residential is that we're about 5 million homes short, of the starter family home, the 3-bedroom, 2-bath is like that starter family home that we're significantly down under because people are prioritizing commercial properties to build. So they're not building, those starter homes.
Because you can't make any money there.
Can't make any money,
So there's definitely a supply side problem.
Which is good for real estate on the residential side if you want to do starter homes,
right, but you've got to also acknowledge the demand side of the equation. Because it's supply and demand. So it is possible for them to bring down aggregate demand to a level to where nominal prices would still come down, even though there's historically low supply. It's just, will they take rates that high? They're using a blunt instrument, right? This is not an X-Acto knife. They're just trying to take a sledgehammer to this and keep their fingers crossed. So, by bringing down asset prices and CPI, does that break the market to the point where that will decrease aggregate demand for the residential homes to bring down nominal prices, which is what they don't want to do? I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out. But the average investor just needs to know that right now there's a tremendous amount of risk in asset prices. And you just have to set up your portfolio to make sure that you're limiting your downside. So when we come out of whatever we go into, and again, there are no certainties, only probabilities. But when we come out of this, if we go into a recession, that they're going to be prepared to take advantage of the massive opportunities which present themselves, which is exactly what Kenny and Robert did during the GFC.